Give me some cartels, please. Must be from Kishore, huh? Jayuradha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayuradha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Ballava Girivardhari Gopi Jana Ballava Girivardhari Yasodhanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yasodhanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jayurada Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayurada Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Ballava Girivardhari Gopi Jana Ballava Girivardhari Yasodhanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yasodhanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jayurada Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayurada Madhava Kunja Bihari Shri Shri Kishore Kishore Ki Jai, Shri Jagannath Shri Baladev Shri Mati Subhadra Ki Jai, Shri Shri Gauranitai Ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaur Premanandi. Namo Vishnu Bharaya Krishna Stabulation. Subal Prabhu, is it actually possible if the harmonium's here, it's like a book stand for the chair? So Jai Krishna Prabhu left this morning for New Vrindavan. He wanted to thank everyone for your kind hospitality, especially the cooks. Pass the word. He's got a little bit of a health condition. He has to be a little, I don't need this actually, he has to be a little more careful of what he eats the last few months. So everybody was very conscious of that. And I'm leaving. I've got a flight about 12:30. We're hoping to come back maybe in November sometime. Try to arrange that we can come back so we can get a shot in the arm by having association of all of you to inspire us in our Krishna consciousness. So we try to come back. It was nice to be here. They have another parade planned in November? Anything else? The Italian parade or the Jewish parade or the Scottish parade or anything else in November? No? East side of Chicago or the west side of Chicago have another parade? We did the south side. Is there another one? Labor Day, that's too far away. No Thanksgiving parade? That's New York, right? They have the big Thanksgiving parade. Okay. Anyway, we're going to try to come back in November. So thank you all for your kind hospitality while we're visiting here. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 50. Krishna establishes Dwarka, which is coming later in the chapter. This is all kind of the preliminary drama to his creating Dwarka. So we're reading, what's on the board is text 41. There's no purport until we get to 44. So we can chant this one together and then we'll go ahead and we'll read some of the other ones. Evam saptadasha kritva tavati okshahini bala yuyudhe magata raja yudubi krishna palitai evam sataptasha kritvas tavati okshahini balaha yuyudhe magato raja yudubi krishna palitai evam sataptasha kritvas tavat yaksho, tavat akshohini balaha yuyudhe magato raja yadubi krishna palitai evam saptaptasha kritvas tavat yokshahini balaha yuyudhe magato raja yadubi krishna palitai evam saptaptasha kritvas tavati okshahina balaha Mataji. Evam saptadasha kritvas yuyude magato Yadubi Krishna Palitai. So I'm not going to do the word meanings because we're going to read a few more verses. So translation, can somebody get me some water? Preferably in a cup and not a plastic bottle. Better for me tap water in a cup than purified water in a plastic bottle. Yeah, please, just a cup. Yeah, no plastic bottles. Too many plastic bottles. Does everyone know that there's an island, there's actually several, the largest island of plastic, I think they call it the Great Pacific something. There's an island of plastic floating in the Pacific Ocean larger than the state of Texas. You can look it up online. And there's multiple. That's the biggest one. So every time we drink out of a plastic bottle, or, people come and bring plastic bags from the grocery store. In some states, plastic bags are banned. I think India now is banning plastic bags, I just read. Really? I just saw a man yesterday brought some things in a plastic bag. Paper bags now? That's good. In Washington, D.C., they have a very nice sign that says, "Thank you for bringing your gifts to the Lord. If you brought it in a plastic bag, please take the bag home with you and recycle it." Otherwise, all day long, people bring 5, 10, 20 bags. It's plastic bags, plastic bottles. Those one-time use plastic, we should try to minimize as much as possible. I know here, every time you get thirsty, in a very wonderful spirit of service, somebody brings you another water in a plastic bottle, but we can do other things. We can get those big refillable bottles. There's so many things we can do, so something to think about. So, okay, so there's the plastic demons, and this is a different demon we're reading about here. We'll go back to this demon. 17 times the king of Magadha met defeat in this very way. And yet throughout these defeats, he fought on with his Akshahini divisions, thank you, Prabhu, against the forces of the Yadu dynasty who were protected by Sri Krishna. Text 42. Akshinvam stadbalam sarvam Vishnaya Krishna tejasa Hateshu sveshvani keshu Tvakto gad adibir nripaha. By the power of Lord Krishna, the Vrishnis would invariably annihilate all of Jarasandar's forces. And when all his soldiers had been killed, the king, released by his enemies, would again go away. So Krishna let him go. He'll bring another Akshahini, come back, wipe that one out, let him go, 17 times. Ashtadasham sangrama agamini tarantara narada preshito viro yavana prajadrishyata. Just as the 18th battle was about to take place, a barbarian warrior named Kalayavana, sent by Narada, appeared on the battlefield. Narada always is in the middle of these things somehow or other. He plays a very instrumental part in so many dramas, What do they call it in modern film when someone makes like a cameo appearance, right? Like, the film's so many other actors, but then the one famous person just shows up for one scene. So Narada's like that. Yeah, special guest appearance. Yeah. Rurodham maturam etya trishibir malechakoti nri loke chapati dvandvo vrishtin sutvatma sammitam. Okay, translation, and this one has a purport. Arriving at Mathura, this Yavana laid siege to the city with 30 million barbarian soldiers. He had never found a human rival worth fighting, but he had heard that the Vrishnis were his equals. So this one, please repeat. Arriving at Mathura, This Yavana laid siege to the city with 30 million barbarian soldiers. He had never found a human rival worth fighting, but he had heard that the Vrishnis were his equals. So I was just thinking, just as an aside, some kind of like modern equivalent to this, a little bit, European history. Napoleon had his armies and he conquered, and then he was defeated and they sent him away, and then he came back to France, and yet again, somehow or other, out of the ruins, assembled within, I think, a few weeks, another army of 100,000 men to go again fight against the people that had already defeated him. And then finally they sent him far enough away. So the numbers are smaller, but similar. These things are not completely out of our historical experience. They get armies sometimes with millions of men. In World War II, millions of people were fighting. Even in the Civil War, I think, I don't know the total number, but definitely with Napoleon, he just got a whole other army of 100,000 people. Okay, you defeated me once, I'm coming back. And then that time he was completely crushed. So that same pride and willingness to follow, you think by the 15th or 16th time, some of those Kshatriyas would say, Jarasandha, this isn't working. But somehow or other, they were so full. Yet again, they joined this army. So it happens sometimes. I always wondered like that with the French. Like, he got defeated so many times. Why are you thinking you're going to be different this time? But people think like that. Okay, purport by the disciples of His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti quotes from the Vishnu Purana concerning the history of Kalayavana. Quote, once Gargya was ridiculed by his brother-in-law as a eunuch, and when the Yadavas heard this, they laughed heartily. Infuriated by their laughter, Gargya set out for the south, thinking, quote, may I have a son who will bring terror to the Yadavas. He worshipped Lord Mahadev, eating powdered iron. Sometimes we think, Mangalartik austerity is a little tough, or, whatever. We have our little tapasya. He ate powdered iron. After 12 years, obtained his desired benediction. Elated, he returned home. So this is still quoting from the Vishnu Purana. Later, when the childless king of the Yavanas requested a son from him, Gargya begot in the Yavana's wife a son, Kalayavana. Kalayavana possessed the fury of Lord Shiva in his aspect as Mahakala. Once Kalayavana asked Narada, here's his little cameo appearance, special guest. He asked Narada, who are the strongest kings on earth? Narada replied that the Yadus were. Thus, sent by Narada, Kalayavana appeared at Mathura. End of the purport. Jai Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Namo Vishnu Paraya Krishna Vrishtai Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Vicharane Nirvasesha Srinivadi Pashtatari Satarane. So, continuation of this exciting story. We're discussing Jai Krishna's class yesterday, and then I gave class the day before. In the Gita, well-known verse, 4.8, Paritanaya sadhunam vinasya taduskitam dharma samstapane taye sambhavami yuge yuge. Krishna says, to deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to reestablish the principles of religion, I appear myself millennium after millennium. So Krishna explains his three purposes, and we're reading this 10th canto of the Bhagavatam about Krishna's pastimes. So it's natural, if Krishna is speaking truthfully in Bhagavad Gita, which we know he is, it's natural, there must be some evidence of how he fulfilled these three purposes. So we know there's so many histories of how he protected the devotees. We know we have Bhagavad Gita and other, Uddhava Gita later in the late cantos of the Bhagavatam, and other places where Krishna gave so many instructions. So also, how did he annihilate all these demoniac elements? So this is being explained, this particular piece. And it's interesting too, this section is coming, I'm not sure the order, but because we're not reading this canto elsewhere. But a lot of times you read, there's some Leela about Krishna creating, and then there's some Leela about, higher rasas of Krishna's relationships with devotees, and then you go back to his warrior Leela. It's all interspersed. So here we're reading about Krishna's pastimes in annihilating the miscreants, and as it says in the beginning of the Krishna book, which we'll be reading, in a few days for Janmashtami, as I mentioned on Saturday, that once the world was overburdened by demoniac kings. So, overburdened means, must have been really overburdened. Like this is one guy, and he brings 30 million barbarian soldiers. We can just imagine, 30, if we got up and heard on the radio, or, our friend called us and said, Prabhu, there's 30 million barbarian warriors in Ontario, and they're about to cross into New York. We'd be like, wow, 30? What do we do? 30 million barbarians, And they all have mystical weapons too. That would be like a pretty scary thing. So Krishna arranges for all of these elements to come together who are blocking the real purpose of human progress, and then he just wipes them all out. Of course, we know Lord Chaitanya has a different Leela. He doesn't come to kill the demons, he comes to kill the demonic mentality. So it's important for us to keep in mind which yuga we live in, and which incarnation we're particularly following in their footsteps. Sometimes devotees think, I want to be like Lord Krishna and fight like him. Of course, for protection purposes, sometimes we need to manifest that. But generally, our principle is based on, our whole culture is change the demoniac mentality of people. I think it was Lord Nityananda, right? When Lord Chaitanya got very angry, was going to kill Jagai Mad, I think. I was going to say Vijay, even say, no, that was before. So it's Jagai Madai, and Lord Nityananda told me, he said, no, Lord Chaitanya, please remember the purpose of our mission. If you're going to kill them because they're evil, you have to kill everybody in this age. So that's not our mission. We have a different mission here. So, but in this time, Lord Krishna was here to try to as he says, annihilate the miscreants in this way. So, a lot of different ways to look at this. We also understand that Krishna, he's the reservoir of all rasas. God is the source of everything. So he's also the source of the chivalrous rasa. So when Krishna fights, again, some people will think, this is a miraculous story. Do you people really believe this? And how is it possible? 30 million? It's like, well, yeah. God is pretty great. So when he comes to show off his chivalry, he does it in a pretty spectacular way. We may think, well, hey, George Washington, he cut down the cherry tree, or whatever, Alexander the Great, he conquered so much of the world, or so many kings in Indian history, Okay, they were great people, but nobody compares to Krishna. That's part of the whole purpose of his mission, to help us understand, okay, there's some happiness in the material world, but nothing compared to what we get from spiritual realization. There's some love in the material world, but it's imperfect. It's nothing compared to the love in the spiritual world. There's some chivalrous rasa in the material world, but nothing compared to that exists within Krishna, within God. So here he's displaying this. We have so many examples, and different people are attracted to different aspects of Krishna. Even in our conditioned state, some of us, like here, I don't know, but there's probably some devotees that just really love to dress Kishore Kishori. And I know at least there's some temples where there are other devotees like, well, yes, Kishore Kishori or Radha Krishna or Radha Ma, they're wonderful, but I want to dress Jagannath, And other people maybe were like, I want to dress Gornitai. Among the Pujaris, there may be, different, and that's just even now in our beginning awakening of Krishna consciousness. So certainly it's there amongst pure devotees. And the example comes to mind of being attracted to the Lord's chivalrous ras of Bhishma. Grandfather Bhishma, who's considered one of the 12 Mahajans, the great acharyas about bhakti, his rasa with Krishna was one of chivalry. And we all know the famous story in the Bhagavatam, in the battle of Kurukshetra, how Krishna had promised everyone, I'm not going to fight. I'll be an advisor, I'll drive Arjuna's chariot, but I'm personally not going to fight. And Grandfather Bhishma so much wanted to see Krishna in that fighting mood, he attacked Arjuna on I don't know which day, 10th day, 11th day, very strongly. He took a vow, I'm going to make the Lord fight today. So he was fighting, Arjuna was being, overcome by Grandfather Bhishma's powers. So Krishna even broke his promise. I mean, he always does so many amazing things at one time. He broke his promise to protect his devotee, Arjuna, who was at risk, but also to satisfy the desires of his devotee, Grandfather Bhishma, who was so pleased to see him like that. And of course, later, when Bhishma is, he's finally felled in battle, although he lived for some time beyond that. At the end, when he was prepared to leave this body, the Lord personally came to see him. So, he personally came. So how dear was Grandfather Bhishma? And his rasa was one of chivalry. So it's part of the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead about these different rasas. So all of the Charyas, they explain that all qualities are coming from Krishna. This is like part of our philosophical perspective on the absolute truth. That he is, what's the word? Saguna? Full of qualities, right? He's not nirguna, he's saguna. So Krishna also has this fighting propensity, and as it's being explained to him, nice purport just a few verses ago, some of our senior Vaishnavas, they summarized with this: the Lord is strict, but he is not malicious. He's strict, but he's not malicious. In fact, he is an ocean of mercy. So even when Krishna is strong, even when he annihilates the miscreants, the same historians, the same text that explain he annihilated all these people, in the same text, the same people explain he liberated those people. So sometimes some may say, well, but no, he killed so many people, how can he be God? He's too cruel. No. Where did you get the information that he annihilated all those people? Well, Sukadeva Goswami, Sutta Goswami, etc., Vyasadeva. Yes, so what did Vyasadeva say about that annihilation? He explained that all these people were simultaneously liberated. So it's not malicious. Krishna's fighting God. Because sometimes people say, well, God can't fight. How can God fight? Then he's like us. He has bad qualities like us. But the Acharyas explained there's no malicious intent in anything that he does. Everything is all good. And I was thinking that even in this world we see, well, we do see in this world, sometimes people, they fight for a good cause. They use that fighting propensity for a good cause. But in this world, it easily becomes contaminated, right? Like, we're in Chicago. Chicago's famous, as are many cities in America today. There's wonderful police people out there, very dedicated to, protect and to serve, like they say in the cars. But we also know sometimes those people, they become influenced. They become the crooks themselves, right? It's a great drama for modern TV shows and all that stuff, The good cop that becomes a bad cop and all of that type of thing. So in this world, even if we try to use this fighting propensity, it's risky because it's very easy to become influenced and to start out with good intentions, but to become malicious. So the Acharyas are saying to us, don't think like that when we hear about Krishna. He's always well intended. Everything he does is for everyone's benefit. So I was thinking, another example came to my mind, modern example. We're in America, they last 20 years or so had these two Gulf Wars. And I remember the first one, American citizens were told, this ruler is bad. He's from Kuwait, right? He's attacked his neighbors. They got a whole global coalition together. They put a strong army, right? Kshatriyas. They pushed him back within his borders. They destroyed his army, and they said, now shut up and stay in your corner. Don't bother anybody. So I can't say for sure, but relatively a representation of using force and stopping the use when it's getting across the line. The second time around, we were all told, no, these people have nuclear weapons. We have to go in and shut down their nuclear weapons. And most of the world didn't agree this time. They weren't convinced. You know, and even America, there were marches, 100,000 people in the streets saying, no, it's premature. Later we found out they didn't have nuclear weapons. But either way, they went in, they made a war, and they went in, but they didn't just push them back. This time they went in, it's okay, we're pushing you back, and we're taking over all of your oil wells. And although we say it's an international effort, we're keeping them ourselves. That's actually what happened. So the intention may be good, but it's so easy to slip into maliciousness or selfishness or abuse. And similarly, we see in this world, and just comparing our experiences to what's described here, in this world, even in the name of good things, sometimes bad happens. So we're reading about Krishna's transcendental. Even what sounds bad is good. In this world, even what seems good often turns out to be very bad. And I was thinking, you know, some examples, say, in the more affectionate or caring rasas that we see here among friends, love, parenthood. You know, these are good things. Someone who's a parent, they're caring for their vulnerable children. If someone loves someone, they're sacrificing for that person. If you have friends, right, you put their well-being in front of yours. But sometimes in the material world, it's such a place that even when you try to be friends, you end up causing more harm. And I was thinking about, you know, sometimes you hear these terrible things. Someone says, I loved her so much, I didn't want anybody, you know, somebody breaks up with their girlfriend or spouse, and they'll say, I loved her so much, I didn't want her to be with anybody else, so I had no choice but to kill her. I mean, right? I'm not making that up, right? We hear things like that. It goes on. So I say, I love her so much, I'm going to kill her. Or sometimes so that's the, you know, conjugal ras as expressed in this world. And sometimes, you know, like a parent will say, I love my son so much, I'm going to force him to do what I want. I don't care if he wants to work in construction. I want him to be a doctor. Or I don't care if he wants to be a doctor. I want him to be a lawyer. And I don't care if she's a brilliant mathematician. You know, girls aren't supposed to be mathematicians. I want her to learn how to, you know, dance, even though she stumbles over her left foot every time she moves, you know. So in the name of parental love, sometimes it happens. You know, sometimes we see with friends too, they become rivals. And sometimes it becomes, you know, they become enemies. It happens all the time. And they start out like friends. So that's the nature of this world we live in. Even our intentions may be good. We can become influenced by the lower modes of material nature. And it's described in the Shastra that in this material world, Prabhupada writes, as like purports in the Gita, says, the three modes of nature, they're always competing. You know, you try to do something in mode of goodness, but passion comes in. You know, you try to do something very nice, but somehow ignorance comes in. It's so hard. You know, you try to have a nice relationship with somebody. Next thing you know, you said the wrong thing. They're offended. The relationship is harmed. You know, it's just the nature of this place. And therefore, what does Prabhupada say about the material world? He says, it's no place for a gentleman. Right? We've all heard him say that. Or a lady. It's not for ladies either. It's not a place for a gentleman or ladies, because it's not a nice place. It's an unpleasant place. But in our optimism, maybe we could say in our you know, our desires are overcome by kama. We want to make this place a really nice place because we want to enjoy our senses. We want friends that support us and people whose love is true. We want to have a police force and a military force we can trust. But the nature material world, as all these things, ultimately, they're not trustworthy. I mean, we still have to trust. You know, we have to do the best we can ourselves, and we have to try to work with people and give people the benefit of the doubt. But like Ronald Reagan said one time when he was negotiating some nuclear arms deal with the Russians, he said that he was into a lot of details, and they said something to the effect, "Don't you trust us?" And he famously said, "Trust, yet verify." Trust, we were talking about that yesterday morning. We should trust, but let's verify too, you know. Someone says, Anuttama, we want to verify what you're doing. I shouldn't be offended by that because, you know, the way the world is, people make mistakes. So here, these verses explaining to that Krishna, God, the source of everything, he's not like that we see here. It's not that sometimes he's good. You know, when he's with the gopis, he's really nice. You know, and when he's on the battlefield, he's mean. And, you know, when he's stealing butter, he's evil. You know, he's really bad. You know, he's taking other people's property. How dare he does that? But then actually, Krishna's fighting in this instance, it's not like that in the material world. It's all good. This is what the Shastra is making this claim. It's trying to help us understand. Because if it is all good, we should completely surrender. But because of our experience in the material world, all of us, at least myself, I'm still like, okay, maybe I should surrender to Krishna. Maybe he's a really good guy. Maybe he's got my best intentions. But I hope so. It seems to be like that. But how come I get a backache all the time? I mean, if he loves me so much, why'd he throw my back out? You know, why did I lose so much money in that deal? If he's so, you know, whatever, we have maybe these doubts. Or like, okay, Krishna, I want to surrender to you. I know the material world's not attractive, but wow, that's a nice car. or, oh boy, that house is a little bigger than the one I have. Or, oh, look at that handsome guy. Or look at that beautiful woman. Or, boy, I wish the mind pulls, so it's like, okay, I want to surrender to Krishna. The mind goes, yeah, but, you know, there's a lot of options out there. So Prabhupada comments a lot of times, therefore, we need to be convinced of Krishna's opulences. And I think that's the way for us to study these kind of sections. Myself personally, I'm not really excited to hear about the 30 million barbarians and the rivers of blood. It doesn't seem to stimulate my bhakti. But when I think of it in these terms, well, yeah, all of those people were blessed by him. These were nasty, nasty people that God himself had to come to take care of, like we mentioned the other day, like Lord Nrsimhadev and Hiranyakashipu. I mean, Indra was like all the demigods became his servant. As powerful as they were, you know, all the religious practices were stopped, all the good things were stopped, and like, Krishna, nobody can do this but you. We really need help. So that's his power. So here, we see he's punishing Jarasandha, and Kaliyavana is going to get his in a very interesting way. Krishna arranges it. Right, this is the whole story of Muchukunda, and he was sleeping in the cave, and that's coming up. Stay tuned for future episodes of Krishna's exciting pastimes. But so here he's punishing Jarasandha, but then it's explained everybody's getting liberated. Even the evil guys are getting benedicted because Krishna's present. And I was thinking there's so many examples in Krishna's Leelas about this. Jai Krishna yesterday mentioned Putana and how she came to poison baby Krishna. And she killed a lot of other children. This wasn't like the first time. This was her modus operandi. She liked to kill babies, right? That's like pretty vicious person. But Krishna's so kind, you know, he sucked her breast, killed her, and benedicted her and considered her, oh, she's my mother. She's my mother. And so many examples like Brahma, right? We think like in the Leela, of course, he's great Acharya in our own line. But, you know, one time he's like, well, this little boy, is he really God? I don't think so. Let me test. Let me take away all of his friends. Let me take away all of his cows. I'll put him in a cave just for a moment. He was just gone. His time, he was gone for just a moment. And then he thought, I better go back and check. That might have been a mistake. Right? So in our time, it was explained, it was like a year. And then he realized he really made a mistake. And Krishna chastised him, but he benefited him. He revealed to him who he was. he gave him instructions so he would never make that mistake again. And Brahma was in ecstasy to understand, my Lord, you know, Vishnu, who controls the universe, who had me create everything, he's this playful little boy Krishna with all these wonderful pastimes. And Indra, of course, Indra, big powerful person, he's a demigod, he's not a nobody. You know, he's not just the mayor of Chicago, which is important position. He's much more important than that. He also got a little angry, right, with the whole Govardhan Leela, and he sent the clouds to I mean, he got very angry. He got really carried away. And Krishna chastised him, but he benefited him in the same way, even though, you know, such an offense. Such an offense. So all of his, so many different Leelas are like that. So some people will say, wait a minute. If the absolute is all good, if it's free from all these negative things of this world, then it has to by nature have no qualities. Prabhupada says, for materialistic mind without divine revelation, the most you can conceive of is the impersonal aspect of the Lord. Obviously, if the transcendence is all good, there's certainly no fighting there. How can there be fighting? And how can, you know, God or the divine have friends? Because in this world, if you have friends, you have enemies. And in this world, if you have pastimes, there's always some kid gets left out, right? Remember on the playground? There's always some kid who's too skinny or too fat or not fast enough or not pretty enough or not tall enough or not. There's always somebody gets left out. So there can't be pastimes in the spiritual world because there's always somebody left out. So that's their God can't have a personality because in this world, personality, there's always a shortcoming, isn't it? If you're a very kind of outgoing person, a lot of times you're a little proud. Or if you're a very thoughtful person, a lot of times you don't know how to make friends, right? You know, it's hard to make friends with people. Or if you're, you know, if you sing very wonderfully, well, maybe you're not so compassionate to the people that can't. So personality is limited. Qualities are limited. Leela, activities. So obviously God is just at the most, beautiful sound. Krishna says it's him. But Prabhupada gives this nice example. Charyas gives this nice example. That's like you're standing on the side of a train track and you see the train coming. And you see, oh, it's a light. Oh, I got it. You say, what's a train? Oh, look, that's a train. Oh, it's a big light. But when you get closer to the train, then you realize, oh, the train's got form and shape. There's cars, there's wheels, it makes noise, it moves. Yeah. But then when the train stops and you get really close, oh, there's an engineer who's driving the thing. There's people inside and they're doing things. They're having dinner and they're looking out the window and they're talking and they're playing with their and everything. So the light is not the whole experience of the train. You know, it's a relative example, but it's partial, but it's not the whole experience. So these are some of the insights that our acharyas give, that when people say God can't have qualities, and there's a lot of, that's a very popular philosophy these days, very popular, you know, nirguna, you know, it's there within Hindu tradition, it's big within the Buddhist tradition, this idea. I might have mentioned, no, I was at a home program the other day. We had a good friend who was a Buddhist professor, and we had him for prasadam one time at our house years ago when I was in Denver. And we asked him, we had a little philosophical discussion. We said, you believe in reincarnation, right, as a Buddhist? He said, yes. We said, but you don't believe in the soul? He said, no, there's no soul. So we said, so what exactly is reincarnating? Pretty basic question. His response was, that's a very good question. That's a very good question. You believe something is moving on, but it's not a soul. It's not an Atma. So what is it? Well, we don't, that's a good question. I mean, it's a pretty basic question. So in the similar way, acharyas explain that people can't conceive of a transcendental person with their mundane mind. Because we think, well, if God's a person, he's got to be like me. God has arms. Well, his arms are like mine. They're limited. You can be, what's his name? Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's got pretty strong arms, but even his arms are pretty limited, right? You can be Godzilla or, whatever human minds can imagine. Who's the big ape? King Kong. He's a pretty strong guy, but he's still limited arms. So obviously God can't have arms. It would be limited. Whatever everything comes from must be beyond all these mundane qualities. But the Acharyas say, no, that's because our limited mind, that's all we can guess. That's all we can speculate. It's like, how do we know what's on the other side of this wall? Maybe if you haven't been there, you can't see through the wall. So our mundane limitations are like that. So therefore, it's described as so important for us to hear these things and to try to understand, well, how is it, how is it Krishna does all these things? He kills all these armies. How is that all good? How is it that Krishna can all of his different leelas? How is it he killed Putana? How is it he punishes this one and punishes that one? So by hearing from Bhagavatam, we learn about the Lord and how he is all good, all pure, all attractive, and how we hear about his stealing. So we need to understand, well, how is that stealing different from my stealing? Oh, you say God's a thief. Well, there's so many thieves downtown in the Chicago, what do they call it, the big jail, famous jail, whatever, Chicago Central Jail. So many thieves. Department of Corrections. Yeah, that's a whole nother Bhagavatam class. So we read about Krishna's naughtiness, Krishna's stealing, Krishna's killing. Really important for us to more and more understand that he's transcendental and whatever he does is all good. And I think it's important, preparing for this class, this thought for me came a little more clear, that in this world, even when people try to say they're doing good, in the ultimate sense, it's not. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try to do good. We have to try to do good as best we can understand it. But keeping in mind also, just like, people are hungry. We want to feed people. We don't want to see people hungry. We don't want to see people in pain. So we feed them, but we feed them Krishna Prasadam. People want to have, happy marriages. Ultimately, material world, you can't be completely happy in anything. But we teach people how, so have a nice marriage and put Krishna in the center, and then you'll actually be happy. And ultimately, that marriage becomes a corollary of our relationship with Krishna. And the deeper our relationship goes with Krishna, the more happy the marriage becomes. The marriage is happy because Krishna's in the center. In everything we do, Like I was speaking with Leela Smarna, her husband, right? Her husband was like a professor. I'd never talked to him much before. Professor of food science and agriculture or something. I was thinking, wow, what an important position. So I was asking him, what's the cutting edge? What's going on in that study? And he was telling me that now, even big scientists and scholars, you go back 20, 30 years ago when we first published like Higher Taste cookbook, there was a little evidence about vegetarianism and, a few books out there. But mostly it was kind of fringe. It was young people, it was, people on the left, politically, hippies, whatever. But now he's telling me now mainstream people are saying because there's not enough water, people need to become vegetarian because there's food, because there's scarcity, because of water. Yeah, water. He told me three things if I can remember: water scarcity, the water scarcity because it's not healthy, which we've been saying for years, and because there's so many, just for our system, and because so many diseases now, that the big scientists are starting to say, we got to get people away from eating so much meat because it's not good for us. And we're all kind of like, duh, We've been saying that for 40 years. We've been saying that for 5,000 years. We're glad you guys are waking up. But the thing that's interesting is they'll listen, certain people will listen to them. They'll listen to the professor. The student goes to college. meets a Hare Krishna on campus who gives them a vegetarian cookbook, some of those students are going to go, wow, this makes sense. I didn't, we shouldn't kill animals. Other people like, oh, who wants to listen to Hare Krishna? But when their professor tells them, when they read scientific journals that tell them, for certain people, that's going to convince them. So it's very interesting to see, in some ways the world's getting worse in a lot of ways, but in some ways the potential for people to really become Krishna conscious is increasing more and more. So, the bottom line is for us to understand through these pastimes about Krishna's transcendental nature. He's not, he's uncontaminated. He's supremely pure, and all of his activities are transcendental. They're all glorious. They're all attractive. They're all merciful. And anywhere we come in contact with them, they purify us. And the more we understand this, the more we can understand, how to surrender Krishna. The more we will surrender. There's a nice verse, 10:7, which I kind of know, but just in case, let me find it. One of my favorite verses. You know this one, Subal Prabhu? Yeah. Etam vibhutim yogam cha mama yo vititattvataha so vikalpena yogena yujite natra samshaya. One who is factually convinced of this opulence and mystic power of mine engages in unalloyed, that means pure, unalloyed devotional service. Of this there's no doubt. So Prabhupada writes the purport, therefore we have to become convinced of Krishna's position. So these pastimes, it's another opportunity for us to see yet another angle of Krishna's opulences and Krishna's divine position. So, little time for questions? Subalji? I went a little late. If anybody needs to go, please do, but otherwise we can talk for a couple of minutes. Just while you're turning out, I just mentioned, I was thinking, I read this verse, I think, what are you supposed to talk about? Killed 30 million barbarians, But when you start thinking about it, there's so many ways of studying this, and, every verse is from so many angles. Prabhupada said we should study his books threadbare, like a piece of cloth. You try it this way, that way, from every different angle. Yes, Subal Prabhu.
Thank you, Anuttama Prabhu. You, in one point of the class, you highlighted that last paragraph of a purport in which the Lord is strict but not malicious.
Yeah.
And you went on to explain how in the material world, there's a common problem that happens, that there is good intentions, but because of the contamination of the modes of nature, it can degrade very easily into maliciousness. And one thing that, taking it as devotees, and not only thinking yourself, but also appreciating all the devotees, or giving that benefit of doubt, of the doubt that all devotees, or most devotees, they have the sincere desire. The motivations are good. The sincere desire to serve Srila Prabhupada's movement, to do good for the devotees. However, we see over and over how sometimes that good intentions ends, in causing a lot of harm. And how we can recognize, understanding that most of us, or many of us, are still afflicted by the modes of nature. The definition of a kanishta is that we have the devotional part, but we have mixed along our, the conditions of the modes of nature. How can we recognize that we may be causing harm? And I'm going to add to that, in general, is something that we may not able to see, because when we have the good intentions, we believe that this is what is going to go good, and I cannot recognize that actually I'm being polluted by my own biases and implicit biases and all these type of things. So how can we recognize that we actually not going to be acting maliciously towards other devotees and causing some harm?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. A few thoughts come to mind. Brajvihari Prabhu, who's one of the co-directors of ISKCON Resolve, works on conflict resolution. He explains like this. He gives the insight that each of us were aware of my intention, but we're not aware of our impact. And an example comes to my mind of one time I really messed up. I was in Mayapur, and I stayed in this one building that was managed by a couple, a householder couple there. And they had a couple kids, maybe they had one kid, and I played with their kids sometimes just for a few minutes, waiting for this or that. Nice family. So I saw them after a couple years, and I saw the lady, and we were, we weren't close friends, but, we're friendly. And I noticed she was like a little large, maybe like I am these days, around the middle. So with all good intention, I said, what I said? I said, "Oh, Mataji, you're pregnant." Okay? And she wasn't pregnant. She just was a little fat. I'll never again make that mistake. Never again. I was actually, so my intention was good. Oh, how nice, you have another child coming, your family's growing, this is wonderful. It was like, no, you just told me I'm fat. Right? So I understood my impact, my intention, but I didn't understand the impact. So we all have to be careful of that. Sometimes, you have trouble with some guy at work, and you call him in and you say, "Listen, you need to start doing this instead of that." And he thinks instead of you're offering him good advice, you're attacking him. It happens all the time. So that's the problem, unpacked a little more. And I think a big part of the solution is we have to be open to criticism of others. We have to be humble enough to hear from people. Okay, I can see you're not happy with what I did. Please help me understand it better. Or to be open, somebody comes up and says, "Anuttama, you just said this and this is what happened." No, that's not what happened. I said this and this and this, and how can he possibly be upset about that? Because, no, Anuttama, calm down. Understand the impact that it had. And I think this is really critical for us as a growing society. One of the qualities of a healthy organization, and definitely a healthy Vaishnav organization and a healthy Vaishnav heart, is we're open for criticism. We're humble enough to take that criticism and to always look. I remember as a brand new devotee reading something about, this is like 40 years ago, Satsuru Maharaj, who wrote so many things, had written some book about, he was in New York, I think, chanting. He was a sannyasi at the time, maybe not a guru at that time, but big devotee associated with Prabhupada. And some new bhakta who didn't know who he was came up to him and said, "Excuse me, Prabhu, you're not chanting the mantra right." And I remember him writing about how, he thought about it. He's like, this bhakta had been there for 3 days, and he was, sannyasi and maybe the GBC of the temple, or, senior devotee, and they gave him the Mahaprasadam plate and all that. But he thought, no, actually, this is Krishna talking to me. I think it was maybe his japa reform notebook or something. He was saying that made him think, I got to chant my japa better. So I think that's a very important thing, that we become self-critical. Because then you're always open for progress. I see that, like I was speaking with devotee about, say, the environmental thing. We have a tendency to think, well, we're vegetarians. What do we have to worry about the environment? We're doing the number one thing for the environment. Well, what about number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6? Well, we don't have to do that. And if someone says, well, I went to the Hare Krishna temple and they served us in styrofoam, And sometimes our response is, well, hey, it's prasadam. It's like, well, yeah, it's prasadam, but we shouldn't have served it in styrofoam. Like that. So there's always room for improvement. Just like I think kind of a traditional way of saying that is, Prabhupada instructed us, we should always be a fool before our spiritual master. I think it's another way of saying that. Be open for criticism, be open for improvement, be open for people showing us how we can do better. And I think a critical factor of doing that is if we're secure in our relationship with Krishna, we can hear that a little better. And that's something we have to work on. And sometimes we feel secure and sometimes we don't feel secure. I know myself, if I'm feeling a little insecure, if somebody comes up and criticizes me or chastises me or gives me the best instructions in the world, it's hard for me to hear that. It's like, I'm barely hanging on and you're telling me what I'm doing wrong. But we really want to become personally strong in a humble way, and a society is strong enough that, people can say, like we had an interfaith dialogue in India, Christians and Vaishnavas, and one year the topic was something about, care for our fellow human beings or something like that. And the Christians, we know generally, that's a big principle for them. You show your love for God by how you care for one another. And at the same time, from our perspective, but let's not leave God out of the picture, because ultimately you need to get out of here. Who is he? What's your relationship? And they don't go so deep on that. But they were kind of saying to us, you guys have great philosophy, but you seem a little hard-hearted with other people sometimes, right? Like you see somebody struggling in the street, we'll walk up and give them a book, but maybe the guy's hungry. Are we thinking about that? So the idea that we need to be open. The very first Vaishnav Christian dialogue we had, it was in Boston, and I picked the topic. The topic was the kingdom of God, because I was thinking, wow, we're going to show them. They know nothing about the kingdom of God. And God's blue, and he's got a mother and a father, Vrindavan, and so like that. So I went around the room, there was one scholar, some of you may recognize the name, Dr. Larry Shin. He was one of the first people to study ISKCON. And it went around the room, and people were talking about their inspiration about the kingdom of God, what they've learned from their tradition, and we were winning, Like the Vaishnavas had so many nice things to say. Of course, that's not the purpose of a dialogue. It's not about winning, but a little bit, there was a little pride there with me for sure. It got to Dr. Larry Shin. He said, he said, I'm a Methodist, I'm a Protestant Christian. He said, my tradition, my scripture doesn't really say that much about the kingdom of God. It doesn't. He goes, but that doesn't bother me. What's important to me is that I live the teachings of God in my life, in my world, and in my community, the way I take care of other people. And, and this dialogue was around 1996. It's right when the child abuse in ISKCON was starting to come forward. It was like 8 years after so many gurus had fallen down in the late 80s. And we were just starting to realize we have social issues. The first 15 years, like, we don't have social issues. We're all, we're pure devotees, whatever. And when he said that, when he was speaking, I felt myself sinking into the chair. Krishna crushed my false ego a little bit, because I was realizing, okay, we're really good in this area. We're not so good in that area. And these people, we shouldn't just think, oh, you don't know anything about this, therefore we can't hear from you. Chanakya Pandit, take good instructions even from a fool. So we should be open like that. What's Krishna teaching me today? You get on the bus and, the bus driver's nice to the lady who gets on in front of us. We should think, well, how come I'm not nice to other people like that? We should learn from the bus driver, etc. My son worked in Hollywood for some years. And I remember him telling me, like, there was one famous actress, I can't remember her name. He was in a movie with her, and she had adopted 2 kids. And he was like really impressed by that, how she was so generous. But then he met some guy that worked on the studio grounds, like some lower job, some kind of retail position or something. He'd adopted 5 kids. And he's just really struck him, like, okay, this is great. She's done this. She did some good thing. Here's this ordinary person who's so kind and so generous and put aside their own their own needs, no more trips to Hawaii, or you're going to buy a new car every 10 years instead of every 3, to help other people. So he was really inspired. Let me be generous in spirit like that. For Krishna. Not just we just say, well, I'm for Krishna, I don't need to do these other things. No, because I'm a devotee of Krishna, I have to do these other things. So that's a long answer to a beautiful question, but is that okay? I think self-criticism is the key. We have to be open for how we can improve. So Neil, if you need to go, please. There's an example with Prabhupada, Satsvarup Maharaj, again, way back in the early days. Prabhupada was giving a class, early days, New York. We'll get back to you in just a second. And, all these young guys didn't have anything to do, and they're just there to hear all day long. And at one point, Satsvarup got up to leave. And Prabhupada said, why are you leaving? He said, I have to go to work. And Prabhupada was like, oh, very nice, please go. He was happy that amongst these, like in that early period, just a bunch of hippie guys, in New York City, that here's a respectable person with a job. So Prabhupada was happy to see him leave from the kata to go do his respect. So if you need to go, please. Hare Krishna. Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu, for the class. I was thinking, like mentally, it's pretty hard to conceive, like Prabhupada, Krishna say, spiritual knowledge is inconceivable. But mentally, we try to conceive, and understand it. But is it necessary to, try to figure it out all the way, like you said, like 10 million soldiers, 10 million barbarian soldiers, is it necessary to try to, analyze that to the point where, we can see that it's spiritual, but mentally, our minds is not, developed enough, or it's on a material level to really understand it. So, how should we, try to understand it on a spiritual level, with a material mind?
Yeah, we can't. We can only understand so far. There's a few places where Prabhupada comments that unless we accept that Krishna is a chintya, which means inconceivable, we'll never understand him. So we have to understand he's a chintya. And then, for our benefit, I think this was a story from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, but Prabhupada certainly spoke it all the time. The frog in the well. I have to tell myself that all the time. My dear brain, you're a frog trying to understand the ocean. Right? Is it twice as big as my well? Is the ocean 10 times as big as my well? 100 times bigger than my well? How do you explain to a frog that's only seen the well? Right? So we have to accept that Krishna is a chintya. So we use our intelligence as far as it goes, but at a certain point, even Lord Brahma said, I don't know any of those verses, but he said something. Others may claim to know you, but for myself, this is Brahma, that created the universe, 4 heads, right? He designed the whole system. We can't even imagine how this universe works. He made this whole single universe, and he said, others may say they understand you. For me, you're beyond my comprehension. I can't understand. You're too great. And Arjuna kind of said to Krishna, hey Krishna, okay, got it. You're the Lord, right? 10th chapter. Okay, you're the source of everything. I bow down before you. I got it. You're it. Would you mind showing me? could you just show me your universal form? He's like, yeah. You sure? Yeah. I really want to see it. Okay. And he's like overwhelmed. And then he's like, go back. At first he's like, oh, I see this and this and this and fearsome forms and all the warriors that crush between your teeth and this, and it's too much for me, Lord. Please. It's too much. Right? Yashoda, right? Krishna eating dirt, just again to kind of show us, because she doesn't remember that you know, and but she opens her mouth. She's the whole universe. She sees herself with Krishna and the rest of the universe. Like, and part of that is to help convince us. So we walk down the street and we see a big sign, new, improved, you know, the best movie ever. You know, you got to come to, you know, the best car ever, the most money ever. With that, that's what we think. That's nothing. It's a spark of Krishna's splendor. Stop trying to trick me, Maya. It's nothing. I may not understand how big he is, but I understand he's big. I was just thinking that on the excellent way down here. Prabhupada talks about become Krishna conscious, you have all knowledge. It doesn't mean we know all the nitty-gritty, but we know the knowable. We know that Krishna is inconceivably great. It's not that we can't know everything about Krishna, it's not possible. But we know about how great he is, and we know this material world is a spark of his splendor. We want to get there, because then we can surrender fully with complete conviction. Is that okay? Yeah. Mataji? Oh, you have a question for? Great. Thank you all for this nice conversation.
Prabhu, as you mentioned, Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami said, this world is not a good place for a gentleman.
Yeah.
So according to this purport also, Kalyavan was born to destroy Yadus. So how we can remain transcendental? Material contamination is so strong. How
do we remain transcendental?
Yeah, material contamination is very strong. Maya has many ways also. So.
Well, you know, Lord Chaitanya said that the most important thing is association with devotees. Because we come here, we get reminded, we get inspired, our realization increases, our connection increases, our conviction increases. So that's the most important thing. You know, a couple times, last night in the Sunday feast, and then the other night at that home pro, I give the same example because I heard Prabhupada say it just recently. If we get in the boat, you know, we're in this material world, the ocean's tossing, huge waves, storms, thunder, lightning, rain, tossing us. But we come to the boat of the Lord's lotus feet in the process of bhakti, Krishna consciousness, then we're protected. And as long as we stay in the boat, gradually we'll cross the ocean. But, you know, Maya is such that one of her tricks is she likes to appear before us now and then and say, you know, you're getting wet in this boat. This boat's never going to make it across the ocean. You're not qualified to be in this boat. Look at all these other rascals you have to sit in this boat with, etc., etc. And then she says, what you really should do is jump off the boat. Right? You'll be more dry in the ocean. There's nicer people, they're called sharks, in the water than in etc. So we have to stay with devotees and remind us, because you know, we have our conditioning. I mean, there's subtle stuff. I've been seeing the last year. Like I'm kind of struggling with some things I thought I got rid of 20 years ago, and they're coming back now. I'm like, what are you talking about? I gave that stuff up. I'm not. That won't make me happy. Why you keep telling me this, my dear friend? Shut up. But without association of devotees, I just me, my mind, and the material world. But I'm with the devotees. It's like, you know, they're reminding me about Krishna. Especially when we have, like we read last night, honest conversations. You know, we want to hear directly about the glories of the Lord. That's the most important thing. But we also need to talk a little bit about our struggles sometimes, and about the challenges that we all have. You know, and you know, because we're in the ocean, and you know, we got to hang on to the boat, and we got to encourage each other to hang on to the boat. And then gradually, slowly, it's guaranteed. Prabhupada says in Gita, success is guaranteed for the rigid practitioner. And rigid doesn't mean you don't get thrown all around on the boat, right? Anybody been in a boat in the middle of a storm, it's not a smooth ride. You get thrown left and right, you get soaking wet. At some point in time, you may even think, I'm in the water, am I in the ocean? Look how wet I am. Did I fall overboard? I'm so wet. No, you're still in the boat. You're just getting hit by the stuff all around you. So that's my understanding. Hearing and chanting, all the different processes, but especially associating with devotees. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's our only hope. Which goes back to your point. You know, devotees, they're all flawed. We're all flawed. We have so many problems. But still we help each other remember Krishna. Mataji, the sunam bonum of the class. One final question or comment, or two or three, as many as you have.
Looking at these two kings that were ready to battle with Krishna, and also bringing Napoleon into the picture in terms of contemporary history. It seems that by virtue of the fact that the Kshatriya has that inbuilt heroism and that necessity to practice conquest, it would seem in one sense that it's natural to pursue further fighting even after defeat, in one sense, based on the personality. So what is that particular inbuilt mechanism in a person with a Kshatriya spirit that permits the acceptance of defeat?
What is it that allows them to accept defeat but still go on? What's the impetus?
Or accept defeat in the sense of not becoming submissive to another ruler.
Of course, they all do. They all do. It's just like you have an alder woman here, right? She wants to have some influence, some control. She wants to be it's a Kshatriya role, administrative role. But she still has the council she's under. You know, and you got a mayor. The mayor's above the altar person. The mayor's another kind of a Kshatriya job. But to one extent or the other, they're under the governor, right? And you have the governor, but the governor, one extent or the other, is kind of under the president. So we have a similar thing here. They're all Kshatriyas. You know, the temple commanders at Kshatriya kind of a job in part. You know, they're still under the council or they're under the president or something like that. So I think part of the mentality is that I want to control, but I also understand. I mean, the demoniac mentality is I'm the supreme controller, but you know, and the pure mentality is I'm going to, like Brahma, I'm going to control, but I'm definitely doing it for Krishna. Only, and the rest of us are in between somewhere or other. So I think that desire to control, it's a natural thing. And we just have to, and for us, direct it to Krishna. You know, that's the bottom line, is we direct it to Krishna. And I think the person that has that desire, they also understand, you know, okay, I've got to work with some. You know, we hear about all the kings, and they all worked under, in that era, they all worked under the emperor. There were so many kings. Sometimes you hear about a king, he's like the king of a village. And somebody else is the king of a region. Somebody else is the king of a small country. And somebody else king of a big country. So they also worked under that. And probably to a certain extent or the other, they would understand their place within that system. That would be my understanding. That didn't satisfy you, what you were thinking about. It was all right? Yeah. You know, it's just like I may be a pujari. I love to dress the deities. There's still a head pujari. Maybe they let me dress Kishori on Tuesday, but I don't get to dress on Sunday because everybody knows, you know, Lakshmi Mataji, wow, she knows how to dress the deities, and on Sunday, she's going to do it because she's the best. You know, and if I'm not careful, I might want to kind of like pull, you know, the material, I want to pull her down to put me up. But in spiritual life as well, how can I help Lakshmi Devi dress the deities even better? How can I learn from her how to dress the deities better? And that's where that spiritual competition comes in. But we have to kind of pull out its material manifestations. Yeah, okay. Any other question? Oh, okay. Thank you all for your patience. We read last night two nights ago, about enthusiasm, confidence, and patience. So you've all really wonderfully manifested the quality of patience to sit here for an extra 20 or 30 minutes. But nice to be with everybody. I fly back, I got to leave in half an hour to the airport, and look forward to being with you all again soon. And please don't forget how fortunate we are. When I was a Bhakta, I don't know if this is a quote from Prabhupada, but it was one of those good instructions, even if it wasn't from him, it could have been, that I think Prabhupada said, but I can't find the place, that if we actually understood how fortunate we are, we would just run from seva to seva to seva. You ever hear that one? You're smiling. You heard that one before? If we'd understood how fortunate we are, because sometimes we become a little lethargic but if we really realized how fortunate we are, even though we have so many disqualifications, we'd be like, wow, I get to take prasadam. Wow, I get to go in Harinam. Wow, I get to clean the temple. Wow, I get to associate with devotees. Wow, I get to clean the bathroom. Vaishnavas use this bathroom. This is not an ordinary toilet. This is like the community comes here, and wow, I get to clean the shoe room. How fortunate we are. So we have to try to remember that, think like that. Krishna's mercy on us. Okay, thank you, Prabhu. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.